rahmatullah alayhi, he was a marja' who at the same time held the honorable position of being a servant of Imam al-Hussein and a speaker and a reciter for Imam al-Hussein. Probably one of the first to combine the two fields. Extremely knowledgeable. He says that Imam al-Hussein personified all the virtues on the day of Ashura, even to the point of teaching us how we should treat someone who is sick when we visit them. Al-iyadah, how do we perform iyadah? How do we visit someone who is sick? How do we talk to them? In the way that when he went to his son, Al-Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he sat there. Imam Zayn al-Abidin is obviously very sick. He's ill. He asks his father, Abi Abdullah al-Hussein, he says to him, "Oh father, what happened to my uncle Abbas? I haven't seen him for a while. I used to hear him when addressing the enemy, when addressing the other camp, but I haven't heard him for a while. What had happened to him? What happened to my brother Ali al-Akbar, my very dear brother?" And Imam al-Hussein would not tell him. We have traditions telling us that it's makruh, it's discouraged, highly discouraged, to give bad news to someone who's sick. And Imam al-Hussein personified this value and this virtue on the day of Ashura. So that's one thing that sets him apart. The other thing that sets Imam al-Hussein apart, and I want you to listen carefully, is the fact that regardless of your religious affiliation, regardless of which faith system you subscribe to, you can't help but fall in love with him. Not because you love him, not just because he was the grandson of the Prophet. People love him for who he was. Antoine Bara is a Christian academic and an author who's written many books about Imam al-Hussein. Just recently he issued another book. He's a Christian. He says, "I'm a Christian and I love Imam al-Hussein." In fact, on the Ahlul Bayt satellite channel that doesn't reach North America, unfortunately, this month of Muharram, we have a series that was produced in Lebanon about Christian poets who have spoken about Imam al-Hussein. The man stands up and says, "I'm an Orthodox Christian, but every night I go to sleep with books about Imam al-Hussein, and I wake up in the morning and I notice my bed sheets wet with my tears. I just sit there and I write poetry and I write and I write and I write. Suddenly I wake up in the morning and I notice that I've written 10,000 verses of poetry about Imam al-Hussein. That's how much I love him." It's fascinating how non-Muslims fall in love with Imam al-Hussein. Yet with other people, it's a very interesting example. With other people, many of their followers love them, not because of who they are, but because of the mere fact that they subscribe to the same faith system. Those who love Muawiyah, for example, do they love him because he was such a great personality? No, they love him because Muawiyah is their leader. That's the way history wanted it to be. And now they just happen to be followers of Muawiyah. Those who love Abu Bakr, for example, why do they love him? Because he was so great in the battles? Because he was so close to the Prophet? Because he's narrated hundreds of traditions from the Prophet? No, in fact, he was the one who said, "Do not narrate traditions of the Prophet." He said, "Don't narrate traditions by the Prophet. Do not quote him, because I'm afraid that people will get confused." Sahih Muslim mentions this. He says, "Well, the Quran is already confusing. Okay, you read the Quran and you get confused. Imagine what would happen if we introduced another element to the ingredient, and that's the traditions of the Holy Prophet of Islam." Imagine companions of the Prophet himself banning the inscription and the transmission of the prophetic traditions. Allahu Akbar. Any other nation would have cherished the narrations of their leaders. They would have protected them at all costs. And these companions were trying to wipe them out. So why do they love Abu Bakr? Because he was so great? No. Because Abu Bakr is the leader of the Sunni school of thought. I'm a Sunni, therefore I deduce from this equation that I must love Abu Bakr. Because it's very easy to concoct and to fabricate traditions to glorify someone. But it's not that easy to fabricate stories which talk about the greatness of that person. We love the commander of the faithful, of course, because the Prophet spoke so highly of him. But that's not the only reason. The other reason is that we could substantiate those narrations, those quotations from the Prophet, with historical reality, with historical facts. And yet, you have other people. A very famous experiment was conducted a few years ago. A man by the name of George Tamarin, he took a quote from the Old Testament, the Jewish holy book. The quote talks about the Battle of the Jericho. And it states that Joshua took the Israelites to Israel. Right? The Battle of Jericho was very important because what Joshua did, he took all these Israelites, he went to Israel, and he said, and I quote, he said, "The Lord instructs you to kill everyone, to burn the city, to kill the cattle, the horses, the oxen, the sheep, the asses, or the donkeys, and to kill every man, woman, and child, and to burn the entire city except for one thing: gold, silver, copper, and iron, because these must go into the treasury of the Lord. The Lord wants these, but not the human beings and those extra little details that you see walking around the streets. Let's kill them all." So what George Tamarin did was interesting. He took this quote to a group of 1,000 children in Israel, obviously all being Jewish. He went to them and he presented them with this quote from the Old Testament, and he asked them this question: do you approve of the acts of Joshua? These acts of genocide or atrocities. There were people women and children getting killed. How could you justify that? Right? So he asked the children whether or not they approved of this. 78% of them said they completely approve of the acts of Joshua. 7% of them said that they only partially approve of that. And the rest said that they completely disapprove of what Joshua did. But the majority, remember, almost 70%, said that they give their complete approval to what he did. And even those who said that they disapprove of the act and the things that Joshua did, some of the reasons they provided were astonishing. One girl, for example, said that, "I don't approve of what Joshua did because this land, Jericho, was inhabited by Arabs. And for us Jews and the Israelites to go into a land inhabited by Arabs would make us impure because the Arabs are impure." Another person justified his disapproval of the act of Joshua by saying that, "Well, I disapprove because he could have spared the cattle. We could have used the horses and the animals. Why did he kill them?" Another one said that, "I disapprove because he burned down the city, but we could have used the houses. Why would he burn down the city, kill the people, but leave the city?" George Tamarin took that same quote. He changed a few variables. He changed the name of Joshua to General Lin, and the word Israel to an ancient Chinese civilization 3,000 years ago. He took that same quote and presented it to another group of children, 1,000 of them, and he surveyed their response to whether or not they approve of General Lin going to an ancient Chinese town and killing all the men, women, and children and burning the city down and committing all these atrocious crimes. And suddenly, surprise, surprise, 90% said they disapprove of what General Lin, this Chinese general, did.